old Stonehenge up there. Nearly 100 years ago, it lent its name to one of the most mysterious and argued about group of prehistoric monuments in Britain. And yet here we are, nearly 100 years later, and by most definitions of henge, Stonehenge isn't even one. In this video, then, we're going to be looking at how that happened and the century-wide debate about what a henge is, and repeated attempts to get rid of the word altogether. And we'll be looking at the bewildering world of henge classification. And of course, we'll also be talking about what they were for, and I'll be sticking my 2 penneth in on that. And in that process, we're going to be looking at henges both large, small, and downright confusing. Hey, who remembers the big breakfast, or is that too modern for my demographic? Let's call this the Big Henge Show. I'm sure already by this stage in the proceedings you've realised that I was seduced by the clickbait potential of having Stonehenge in the title of this video rather than the Big Henge Show. I did try to get Denise Van Elton on board, but unfortunately she had a prior booking. More's the pity. Those of you familiar with Stonehenge will identify that I have taken the Cheapskate option and avoided paying 25 quid, 30 quid, whatever it is, like all those numpties up there, to be herded into a cattle truck. I'm on open access land, which is just to the north of Stonehenge, and you can get pretty close to it. I even managed to get the drone up, despite this wind, but be careful if you do that, because it's a no-fly zone past the line of the old road. And there is a fantastic Tweedy Outdoors video for Cheapskate access to Stonehenge. I'll put a link to that in the description. I could, of course, got in there for free. I'm a member of both the English Heritage and the National Trust. I just don't want to be a part of any totalitarian one-way system. I can remember the days when you could pull up alongside Stonehenge for free, park up, have a picnic. You could even chip off a little bit and take it home as a souvenir. Political correctness gone mad. I've just been filmed by some tourists there doing subsequent retakes of that last scene. I'd love to see where that ends up. So Stonehenge, the name, comes from the lintels. It's all about the lintels, hanging stones. And yet nothing that we have subsequently classified as a henge has those. The other big thing with Stonehenge is that it does have a henge-like bank and ditch, but its ditch is outside, so the bank is on the inside. And again, nothing that we consider a henge has that. So whatever Stonehenge is, it isn't actually a henge. Key characteristics then, so you have the outer bank, an inner ditch, not outer, and an unexcavated bit or bits of that ditch to create a causewayed entrance. There may be one entrance, there may be 2 entrances, and then in the centre you have this circular area. Hey, let's just call that a dais, for instance. And one of the big questions about henges during this nigh-on century-long debate has been, does that central area have to have internal features, for instance, a stone circle or a timber post circle? Tentatively dated to the late Neolithic through to the early Bronze Age, the internal features of the henge may respect sort of lunar and solar alignments, you know, that sort of thing. There may be depositions, but it's not primarily about burials, and it's not domestic stuff. Very typically, henges will be sited in landscapes with earlier features, commonly cursuses, cursi, I never know which. And then later on, we get things like this, barrows. And that very often leads to the annoying overuse of the term palimpsest by historians. Really, really annoying. Switching location again to keep this zipping along. And do you know what? After nearly 100 years of study, the experts no longer know or have any clarity on what the term henge actually means. And back to Stonehenge. It is absolutely heaving over there at Stonehenge. I'm glad I got away from that. Incidentally, some of you may be more familiar with Stonehenge by its alternative name, the Mayburgh Henge of the South. Whew, do you know, out of the wind down south here today, it's quite hot. I've shed some clothing for this one. I hope you don't mind. I'm actually walking alongside the Stonehenge cursus there. Can you see me going down into the dip? It's very faint. And then up onto the bank. There's a barrow there. We're at the sort of far western end of the cursus. I was going to put the drone up, but it's way too windy. You can't really see it anyway. Not really part of our story. So it was in 1932 that a chap called T.D. Kendrick first coined the term henge to describe prehistoric monuments that were largely round or oval with an inner ditch that were not primarily for burials and that could be tentatively dated to the late Neolithic through to the early Bronze Age. He was extremely nervous about it, and whenever he quoted the term henge in writing, it was always in inverted commas. Kendrick's nervousness about using this term henge was that he was including in his list sites that didn't have any stones within them or signs of timber posts. He saw them effectively as sacred places, as temples. So Kendrick was naming his monument type after both Stonehenge and Woodhenge. Woodhenge, of course, also took its name from Stonehenge, but interestingly, that was more about the similarity with between the alignments of the stones at Stonehenge and the timber posts at Woodhenge. And then, of course, much later on, who can forget the psychodrama that was Seahenge? I seem to remember that had our good friend Francis Pryor in a right old blather. Right, we'll see if we can get these sheep to demonstrate the Stonehenge cursus. They're sort of up on the bank. Ladies, can you show, please? Come on, that's it. See that? There's the ditch. So they're coming down off of the cursus bank and into the ditch. There's the ditch. Thanks, ladies. There's a bit of cursus bank. Can you see it? I bet you can't. Anyhow, all this crashing around in the Wessex countryside on cursuses, cursi that you can't see has made me feel a little bit like Paul Whitewick. So I'm going to go up there and do the next bits by running at a camera low down on the ground. Right, here goes. 1936, Graham Clark comes along. He emphasises the need for the external bank, the inner ditch and the causewayed entrance for a monument to be classified as a henge. But he's still nervous. He says henge in inverted commas. 1939, Stuart and Peggy Pigott introduced the distinction between henges with one entrance and henges with two entrances. However, they're still using the term with these. And that is the top of the Stonehenge cursus, but you can't see a thing. I bet this bit is an old railway line, and I bet Paul knows which one it is. Paul, let me know in the comments down below. Just Paul, nobody else. I can't do any more of that Paul Whitewick stuff, I'm afraid. My knees are way too old. Anyhow, behind me there is Woodhenge, a very unusual looking henge. I tried to get the drone up, it did blow away. There was a bit of off-camera antics going on, but hopefully you can see. Ignore these concrete posts for the moment. You can just about make out the outline of the henge bank. So Woodhenge, as with Stonehenge, is where Kendrick decided to take the henge term from. It really is an extraordinary thing, isn't it, with all these 1920s concrete posts? And I have got to be extraordinarily careful about this next bit. You see, it was excavated in 1926 by Ben and Maud, bear with me, Cunnington. And this henge had a whole series, I think it's 6 concentric rings of timber posts in it. But I mentioned earlier, it's the alignment of the posts and their similarity with the the Sarsens at Stonehenge that led to Kendrick deciding to call his monument class Henges. And then over there we have Durrington Walls, what we'll later learn to be a super henge. I'm not going to try and risk putting the drone up to show you, it's way too windy. Show you on a map, there's not a huge amount to see there. Massive. But it's confusing because it was possibly the largest Neolithic settlement in Europe that was then later Hengified. Anyhow, in our story of henge classification, we arrive at 1951. and introduce ourselves to Atkinson. Now, he identified 36 sites and he introduced a classification system, Class 1 and Class 2. Let's get into Atkinson's classification then. I am stood in the entrance of a Class 1 henge. Class 1, single entrance. It just has the one entrance, sort of facing southeast. There's a solstice alignment in that. I'll put that in the comments. I can see the bank. It is quite low. I can see the ditch on that side. I can see the ditch on that side, although sadly, recently quarried, unbelievably. I'm now walking over the causewayed entrance, over the ditch, onto the central area. I tend to call them a dais, although I believe that is frowned upon. This is such a cute little henge. It's an odd one for me to choose because it is so tiny, but it really is cute. I am inclined to introduce a new WC21 UK Productions Limited classification called Cute Henge, but as you will discover during the course of this video, we probably don't need any other classifications. It really is wonderful. And no people. It's always good when there's no people. Let me run across here and show you the dinky little inner ditch. Look at that. Isn't that cute? It's the only word I can think of. Now, interestingly, with this one, you'll see the ditch is flush to the bank. There's no berm between the two, and we'll be talking about that sort of thing a little bit later on. Now, Atkinson acknowledged that with the Class 1 henges, they were typically a bit smaller than the Class 2 henges that we will get onto, normally coming in under 400 feet. Now, this one is just 35 metres across, so it really is tiny. Just a quick word. After last week, where I got castigated for using imperial measurements, which I flipped to doing several months ago because I kept getting castigated for using metric and being called woke, I have decided I'm going to use both now. Where I say one and don't say the other, I'll put it on the screen. So there is really no more need for castigation. And to help us get our head round this classification this week, our good friends over at Brian Camp Graphics Limited have got some state-of-the-art images to show you. So Class 1 means that we've got the outer bank, the inner ditch, and just the one causewayed entrance. Whilst this pit that has been cut into this wonderful henge is a terrible thing to see, it does enable me to show you this. Now, where they've quarried into it, you can see, get an idea of how deeply into the bedrock they cut this ditch when they built it. The recent excavations, I think about 2014, they've dated this one to 3000 BC, and that's a really key date for us here. That's around about the start of the time where they really got into circularity. They also found somewhere over there a 3600 BC Neolithic house, one of the oldest houses ever identified in Britain, but obviously a 600-year gap between the two, so there's not necessarily any linkage there. As well as the single entrance, the other characteristic that Atkinson put on the Class 1 henges was that they were typically earlier than the Class 2 henges, and he based that on the finds, fairly limited finds in reality, at that time and even still today, but sort of mid-Neolithic wear, grooved wear, skewer pins, transverse arrowheads, that sort of thing. Oh, do you know what? Sod it. I am going to introduce a new classification. Cute henge. This is such a cute henge. Excuse me one second. Oh, that's nice. It's Tweedy congratulating us on achieving 10,000 subscribers recently. And a huge thanks to all of you for supporting us. Of course, the journey doesn't stop there, so if you haven't subscribed, please do so. And thanks also to our members as well. Details of how you can join the Institute of Amateur YouTube Antiquarians can be found in the description down below. Before I leave Yarnbury, there it is up there. This is the line of the public footpath that runs right by the side of it. And look at what we've got all along that footpath. Deeply bedded stones. Neolithic continuity, perhaps. The Stone Age is still with us in 2025. Now, with a clever lot like you lot, I'm sure you've already cottoned on. Atkinson's second level of classification is Class 2, and a Class 2 henge has 2 entrances. I am at a truly iconic henge here. It's Arbor Low in the Derbyshire Dales, and I've whizzed around really quickly with the drone. I might be on slightly dodgy ground with that here. It's a remarkable henge. Let's go and have a look to it. I'm at entrance 1 of 2 here at Arbor Low, and we have a beautiful example of the causewayed entrance, one of 2 entrances here at a Class 2 henge. You can see how this area has remained unexcavated to provide access to the centre of the henge. And 4 again, because look, at this one we have stones. And that inevitably leads to a later complication in the challenging task of henge classification when Aubrey Burl in 1969, I think, introduced another idea, the circle henge. Now, I know you won't remember from earlier when I was talking about Kendrick in the 1930s and how nervous he was about including sites in his list of henges that had no stones or timber posts. Well, here at Arbor Low, we obviously do have stones, fallen stones. Now, the interesting thing is, look how close they are to this huge ditch. I mean, just look at how close that is there to the edge of the ditch. I know you might say it's fallen the other way, but as I look along, you can sort of see the remnant of the pits that these once stood in, and they are very close to the ditch. So it has become a view. Opinions, surprise, surprise, have reversed somewhat in more recent years. And the idea here at Arbor Low and other henge circle sites is that the circle was actually here first, and then it was effectively hengified. And oh dear, I've just introduced another term, haven't I? I mean, look at that one, it's clearly toppled inwards. So it was stood at this end that you could see, and there's the ditch. It would have been very difficult to erect that stone circle, as we used to believe, after the ditch had been dug. This terminal debate about the use of the term henge in inverted commas or not, no, scrub that, always in inverted commas, laboured on post-Atkinson. In 1954, a chap called Clare expressed his dissatisfaction with Atkinson's use of henge in relation to a site at Dorchester-upon-Thames, primarily because of the absence of any uprights there. However, Clark carried on using the term henge in inverted commas. By the time you get to 1986, Clare arrives, and I'm assuming Clare is a chap. I know that's a dodgy thing to do nowadays. And it was him in 1986 that really pushed this point of the primacy of the circle, the idea that the circle was first and the henge was later. That ditch is an absolute cracker. I can't stop looking at it. There is so much to love here for if you're a ditchaholic or an antiquarian. I'm both of those things. Like that, for instance, built into the outer bank, a really splendid bowl barrow. Now, we don't think henges are primarily about burials. They're not mortuary enclosures, although time and time again, in their later life, we see them being adapted, as has been rather splendidly done there. And then, in the centre of this one, we have one of my favourite things, although I can't explain why. We have the remains of a stone cove. If the story of henges is about a move towards embracing circularity, then we have the best of both worlds here, don't we? Because we have the bank, the ditch, the henge structure, and the stone circle. And the stone circle here is one of only 45 out of something like 250, according to Historic England, that is irregular. So it's a good place for circulaholics too. I suffer from that as well. You'll have to forgive me, I can't stop admiring this ditch. It's so splendid. The bank is impressive as well here. It's massive. You notice I've stopped saying amazing in this. I've noticed recently I've picked up a little bit of a tick of saying everything is amazing. That's sort of an antiquarian tick. This one is about 90 metres across, so it's actually a little bit smaller than the average size that Atkinson put on a Class 1 henge. But as we've discussed, it would appear that the stone circle was here first, so that must have dictated the size of the henge when henges came into fashion. Other noticeable things about this site, much later, is that I think this is the place that inspired Julian Cope, is that what he was called, of The Teardrop Explodes, a 1980s sort of rock combo sort of outfit, to give up pop music and get into stone circles. I think that is this site. And possibly also, I'm not sure, you'll have to let me know in the comments, is this where that chap in Sightseers murdered a National Trust guy? Just a film, it wasn't real. Let me know if you think it was. More henges to get to on our big henge show. Excuse me 1 second. Oh, it's Tweedy again. Just a short way from Arbor Low Henge, we have that Gib Hill or Jib Hill. I'm not entirely sure. I'm thinking Bee Gees, but you could let me know in the comments if you know the correct answer. But before you do that, just go through all the comments and check that nobody else has answered so that I don't get 59 answers to exactly the same question. That would be great. Now, what we have there is a Neolithic barrow, and then there's a Bronze Age barrow on the top of it. And early excavations suggest that over here is the likely earlier site before the henge was constructed. So over this side we have non-circular things before circularity took hold. That's Arbor Low then, absolutely fantastic. And some refer to that as the Thornborough Henges of the Midlands. I'm now at the Thornborough complex. I'm at the northern henge, which is protected by these trees. The other two are exposed. Now here we have a whole new variation on the henge classification. I'm waiting for Adam Morgan Ibbotson to arrive so he can tell me all about it, but no sign of him yet. Where is he? Oh, there you are, Adam. Are you all right? I was beginning to fear you'd got lost.
I just ran from Ray Cross.
Oh, right. Anyhow, this lot in here, my imaginary friends, they've got a question for you. There's something special about this place, isn't there? This is not just a Class 2 henge. It's got
an A.
It's got an A. What is the significance of that?
Well, the A doesn't stand for anything. It's just a subtype. But a Class 2 henge obviously has the two entrances facing one another, and that's what this has. The only difference is that the Thornborough type, as it's so creatively known, 2A, has an outer ditch around both the bank and ditch.
An outer ditch?
An outer ditch, which is completely uninterrupted by entrances. It's just all the way around. None of them have ever been excavated properly, so we don't know what the outer ditch actually was. It might have been something that post-dated or predated the henge. But either way, that's what they have, an outer ditch, uninterrupted, all the way around.
A mile-long complex of 3 henges, northwest to southwest, possibly amongst the oldest in Britain. This is an awe-inspiring place. The northern henge is the best preserved, having been planted with trees, and compared to all the others we've seen, it's the wide berm that stood out to me here, creating a viewing platform between the huge outer bank, the inner ditch, and the round bit in the middle. The southern henge has suffered the most, but is still there and evident in the landscape, and thankfully the whole site is now protected from the encroaching quarries and farmers wanting to plough out the southern henge. And I'm not joshing. That happened, according to the best of sources. A chap walking a dog who we met.
Of course, if you want to look at kooky alignments, you need to align the place. And it's at henges that they used a little magical thing called a causeway. Yes, a bank and ditch a henge doesn't necessarily make. You need something to join up the dots. And the dots here at Thornborough, well, they join up to the winter solstice sunrise. And funnily enough, the central henge, which this causeway looks directly out onto.
Here we are in the southern gateway of the central henge at Thornborough. Now, it's a very different kettle of fish to the northern one. The banks are still high and impressive, but inside, it's pretty flat. You can't really see the causeway, can you, Adam, or the ditch?
Well, why don't you get in it so we can see? While Darren runs off into the ditch there, I'll tell you something about this henge. Henges like this have what you might describe as a theatre in the round plan. He didn't know what a theatre in the round was, because obviously he's too cultured for that. But if you think of Shakespeare's theatre there in London, quite similar to that, where everyone around the outside faces inwards to the one central feature separated by the bank. Are you done in there?
Is that enough?
I don't know, it's your channel.
And we are done here for this video, but we will return, so Orion's bracelet fans, do not fear. We will go into that at a later date. It was interesting to note these river boulders laying around, apparently used in the construction at Thornborough Henges, which brings us to... That then is Atkinson's system, a simple system. And I like simple systems. Does size matter with Henges? Well, it rarely does it? I don't think it does. But there are problems. I'm at one of my favourite Henges, and I better do inverted commas for that, Mayburgh Henge. I suppose you'd call this a Class 1 henge by Atkinson. It has one entrance. However, there is no ditch, and the bank is built out of river boulders. If it hadn't been for the southern traffic, I might have also gone to Avebury. That's apparently a Class 2 henge, and yet it has 4 entrances. I love this place. It really is one of my favourites. I enjoyed my little trip down south, by the way, but seriously, guys, I don't know how you cope with all that traffic. Chaos. Anyhow, over here on some river boulders is my notebook, because I want to tell you a story. And it's a story about henge-based chaos that broke out in the 1970s and the 1980s. Are you sitting comfortably? Then I shall begin. Experts hate simplicity, don't they? 1969, a chap called Wainwright, not that one, blows the whole thing up. Basically, anything that's round and prehistoric, even things with burials in, becomes a henge by Wainwright's classification. He even introduces a new term, Hengeform. Now think of that, Hengeform. That could mean that anything could be classed as a henge, and it pretty much was. 1971, a chap called Catherall chips in, tries to bring some sanity to proceedings, but nobody takes any notice of his idea. In 1989, Berkeley tries to get back behind Piggott's original classification, but no one's really listening. It's 1987 with Harding and Lee, who sound a bit like an estate agent, but I'm told that they weren't. They really get behind Atkinson again. However, they can't resist introducing some new terms to add to the confusion in our minds. Listen to these: the classic henge, henge enclosures, and mini henges. And then in 2003, Jan, or is that Jan Harding, Adam Morgan Ibbotson, again pretty much gets behind Harding and Lee, and therefore Atkinson as well, but can't resist some new ones. We have the mini classic and super henges. Circle henge. Poor old Stonehenge then. Not only does it face the indignity of busloads of tourists traipsing around it every day, but it had its name stolen, first of all by Woodhenge. And today there's this whole long list, possibly 80 monuments in Britain, naming themselves after that, but really they're completely different. Before me there is the magnificent King Arthur's Round Table, and many of you may be familiar with that name because Woodhenge that we visited earlier in the video often goes by the name of the King Arthur's Round Table of the South, doesn't it? It's a Class 2 henge, although you'll see that it has lost its entrance on that side to the road, but I'm very fond of it. I think in terms of classification, as long as we've got a bank, an internal ditch, a causewayed entrance, and the structure is not primarily about burials, then it's fine to call it a henge, and we can drop those inverted commas. I love all the names of the historians we've encountered, by the way, on this video. You can imagine them on the cover of an early 70s Country and Western album, I think. Around about just prior to 3000 BC, out went irregular shaped structures. Causewayed enclosures disappeared. Cursi came to an end, and in comes circularity. And between 3000 BC and around 1200 BC, it's not just henges, there's also stone circles, and many of those are very different, aren't they? But what were they about? Now, the common view is that they were ceremonial, and it's very hard to look at Thornborough Henges with those three fantastic, I nearly said amazing, those three fantastic henges lined up with their entrances lined up like that, and to not see some form of ceremonial procession happening there. But the truth is, we don't really know, do we, what they were for. We have a viewer who I'm sure will argue that they were used for hunting. She sees all of these prehistoric structures as some sort of hunting related. But I like what Aubrey Burl said in the 1970s. You know, they found axes in these henges, and they're typically near to rivers. So I think they were used for trading centres. A huge amount of effort must have gone into building these, even if it was using forced labour. So perhaps there is a ceremony in there, but I think it's multifunctional. And we know that they were trading in the Neolithic, and we know that they were travelling up the rivers and along the coast. So that's just my view on it. I'm sure you'll have yours in the comments down below. I hope you've enjoyed the video. It's been hard work to put this together. Still got to edit the thing, but it has been really interesting. Apologies to everybody in the other countries of the United Kingdom that I seem to have inadvertently only visited English henges. I will put that right at some time. I'll see you next week. Oh, excuse me a second. A text.